The Giants went down last night really without much of a fight, and it was a discouraging scene as the 2022 season winds to a close. Now they must win the finale in order to finish at 500. So we're going to get into all of it and what they need to do to fix this team next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts. Today's episode of Locked On Giants is sponsored by Simply Safe Home Security. With Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe, 24/7 monitoring agents capture evidence to accurately verify a threat for faster police response. There's no safe like Simply Safe. Visit simplysafe.com/LockedOnMLB to learn more. And coming up on today's show, the Giants played the second game of this 3-game series in San Diego, and they got shut down. It was a very frustrating game from my perspective. They ended up allowing 14 hits in the very first inning. The first two hitters of the game for the Giants, Austin Slater walked, Thairo Estrada singled. They had first and third. Nobody out against Sean Manaea, a lefty who's been very vulnerable this season. And they've got Wilmer Flores, who doesn't strike out and has been clutch historically in his career. And you've got J.D. Davis after him. It's just a great situation to be in for the Giants to get off on the right foot. And what happens? Wilmer Flores inexplicably strikes out on 3 pitches. He ends up going 0 for 4 with 3 Ks. He really has been in a slump for the last 2 months. If we look at the numbers, it's been pretty bad for the last couple months for Flores. And then, so he Ks on 3 pitches, and then J.D. Davis grounds into a double play. So while they were like really hot for a stretch in these last couple games and in their loss to the D-Backs a few days ago, they've kind of shown their warts again. And so I think in some ways you can spin that as a good thing, because it's possible that if they just dominated over the last couple weeks of the season, they could really kind of have rosy colored glasses, or whatever, rose-colored glasses, whatever the phrase is, and view themselves a little bit more positively than they should. But we're seeing, like, for example, like J.D. Davis swinging and missing a lot. That's just part of his game. And so it needs to, we need to see that to be reminded that that's part of his game. Hopefully they can kind of view themselves a little more neutrally and not get overly optimistic or overly pessimistic. But clearly this is a team that needs some work. A lot more happened yesterday, and even today there's things to talk about. Alex Cobb made the start in place of Carlos Rodon, who was in fact shut down, put on the injured list without an injury specified, and Alex Cobb pitched on short rest, so his season is over. And then today we're hearing that Jock Peterson was placed on the family medical emergency list, so we're going to get into that a little bit later. But in terms of what the Giants need to do to fix their team, I continue to believe that their biggest issue is on the position player side. I think that their starting pitching ended up being pretty darn good. And in fact, there was a note that came out yesterday from Codify on Twitter, which works with a lot of professional pitchers to hone their craft. And the note was that the Giants, Carlos Rodon and Logan Webb, were the only teammates to pitch at least 175 innings and have an ERA plus of 135 or better. I think it was 135. But, 100 is league average, 135, 35 points above average. And so Rodon and Webb were really good. Cobb ended up being really good, even though the peripheral numbers were even much better. The overall numbers are still fine when all was said and done for Cobb. But on the position player side, there's just a lot of kind of non-competitive at-bats, and they're also just missing that impact talent. But something I wanted to point out that we haven't talked about much this year, but it's just a reality, is that the Giants kind of seem to strike out too much, which was not really the case last year or any of these years under Farhan Zaidi, as far as I can recall. This year, they have the seventh highest strikeout rate in Major League Baseball. Now, before you panic, the Braves have the third highest strikeout rate in Major League Baseball, but they really, really impact the ball in a way that is superior to what the Giants do. Like the Braves hit 252, 317 on base, 442 slugging. Giants hit 233, 315 on base, 388 slugging. So the Giants do hit for an above average amount of power, believe it or not. But the swinging and missing and just the striking out generally against sometimes guys who just aren't strikeout pitchers and just going up there and whiffing at 3 straight pitches. I don't know. I just see at times non-competitive at bats. When the team is playing better, of course, we don't see that as much, but there have been way more non-competitive at bats than I have been used to seeing the last couple years under this coaching staff. So I don't know if they need to make a change in the coaching staff, bring in somebody else to kind of fill the shoes left by Donnie Ecker. But overall, the position player group is what needs work. And on any given night, you look at the lineup and you're just not seeing any impact talent. I think you're seeing a ton of complementary players without true impact talent. And so the Giants will go into the offseason looking at the list of potential free agents. There are several players who can be that impact talent. But the question is, are they going to end up with any of them? So coming up in just a minute, I want to kind of run through not just necessarily the big names like Aaron Judge and Trey Turner, some of the other shortstops, but all the guys. I've looked at all the free agents and who are the players who can address what it is this team needs. We'll get into it in just a minute. But first, the numbers don't lie. In the last decade, over 4 million people have chosen SimpliSafe home security to protect their home. You don't earn the trust of that many people without doing something right. At SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. I know because I use SimpliSafe in my own home. They protect you with cutting-edge technology, powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back. Here's why I love it. I mean, the number one thing for me is just being able to look at my phone and see crystal clear HD live streams of all my video cameras. And what's great about this technology, and this has happened to me, is that you can move after you install it. Just remove the elements and take them with you to your new place. And it's also super customizable. It's not a situation where you have to purchase things you don't need in order to get certain things you want. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. Save 20% off your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month free. Visit simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb to learn more. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. All right, as promised, we are going to discuss the players who stand out to me as possible solutions for the Giants moving forward, because there's just not enough fight in this lineup. I mean, they try, but there's just not enough there. There's not enough impact talent, and it's just wearing on me a little bit. They have to win this one more game. By the way, I wanted to mention, like, overall offensively, right? They've got a 101 weighted runs created plus, which means their offense has been about league average. And if you look across the league, I mean, they're better than the Cleveland Guardians, who are in the postseason. They're tied with the Tampa Bay Rays. They're just a couple ticks behind the Padres, believe it or not. Guess what? The Giants hit for way more power than the Padres. Giants have a 155 ISO, which is slugging minus batting average, and the Padres are at 141. Padres have 153 home runs. The Giants have 180 home runs. So I think a lot of people wouldn't guess that off the top of their heads. So it's not like the Giants absolutely can't hit. Offensively, they're mediocre. But when I talk about position players, this is why, like, the concept of wins above replacement is important, because simply it's the main objective of a number like that. Forget about analytics and blah, blah, blah. It's simply trying to combine all of the different things that you're doing into one number versus this is what he does offensively. This is what he does defensively. This is what he does on the bases as a runner. It's combining all of that and what position you play, because certain positions have more value. If you're a really good shortstop, that's one of the more valuable things you can do defensively. Versus if you're a really good first baseman, it's not as valuable as being a really good shortstop. So anyway, a number like WAR takes all of that into account, and that's why the Giants, despite being average overall offensively, just simply with the bats in their hands, they come in at 20th in wins above replacement per Fangraphs by their position players because of their defense. So when we talk about the Giants have a position player problem, it's like doesn't necessarily mean they have an offensive problem. It just means the players who are out there, not the pitchers, aren't good enough. They have a bunch of fine guys. They're fine, but they just don't have true impact talent, which is something you need in order to be a good team. It's hard to have a really good team without true impact talent anywhere on your position player mix. So I have gone through all of the free agents who are out there. I've looked at every single one. There are, of course, possible non-tender candidates. There are club options that will be declined. So some guys will be released into free agency. Cody Bellinger comes to mind as a guy who will probably end up being non-tendered by the Dodgers, just by way of example. But, I mean, at the various positions, the Giants have kind of established a sense of flexibility on their position player side because a lot of guys move around the diamond. So they're not necessarily stuck in a position where they have to like target certain guys at certain positions. They can move people around. They can ask players they sign to move around potentially. But there's no doubt, I mean, the true impact talents out there are Aaron Judge and the shortstops. Xander Bogaerts, Carlos Correa, who has an opt-out of 2 years, $70.2 million that he's almost certain to exercise. Dansby Swanson, who does it mostly defensively and on the bases and is a pretty good hitter, but not elite offensively, and Trey Turner. But besides that, the players who I've kind of highlighted here, you've got Jose Abreu, who's an older first baseman for the Chicago White Sox, but man, can Jose Abreu hit. This guy is, I think he's 36 years old, and he's only played for the Chicago White Sox in his career, coming over from Cuba, I believe. And yeah, he'll be 36 in January. But this year, he's hit 304, 378 on base, 446 slugging, just kind of impact with the bat. And he doesn't strike out. He's kind of a unique hitter in that he really doesn't strike out, but he also is he's a power hitter to a degree. This year, only 15 home runs. But the first base position is unsettled for the Giants. I wouldn't expect them to end up with Jose Abreu, but he's a guy to pay attention to. Josh Bell is another guy. Hasn't been great with the Padres. So, I don't know exactly what to expect from him moving forward, but he is just out there in free agency. He will be. He's 30 years old. Overall, a solid season from him, 123 weighted runs created plus. He's not known as the best defender. He's not a good runner. He is a switch hitter. He also doesn't strike out. So they could address some of their strikeout issues with either of these players. You've also got Anthony Rizzo can opt out of his 1 year, $16 million deal with the Yankees. And coming off the season that he's had in New York, I think that would be something he'll probably do if I had to guess. Rizzo is 33. Really solid season in New York. Like I said, 134 weighted runs created plus. He's been durable. 32 homers. He also doesn't strike out. So this is an interesting free agent first base class because you've got three different, probably the best three at that position are all guys who have a somewhat unique offensive profile in that they impact the ball, but they also don't K. Trey Mancini is also out there, as is Brandon Drury, who can play around the diamond. And I've been really impressed with the season that Brandon Drury has had, and the fact that he can move around and does move around the diamond is something that the Giants really do seem to value. And so, I don't know, on a modest deal, I could see Brandon Drury ending up with the Giants, but that's more of a complementary player, less of that impact that we're talking about. So in terms of other impact guys, I mean, Gene Segura is like fringe. He's definitely not impact. There's a $17 million club option. I suppose they could pick it up, but they probably won't if I had to guess. But Gene Segura is just kind of a solid all around, little bit underrated player, and he also doesn't strike out much. And so I don't know. I mean, yeah, 14.8% strikeout rate. Certainly not an impact bat. A 106 weighted runs created plus, 1.8 Fangraphs wins above replacement. He hasn't played a full season, only 384 plate appearances, but a solid player. I would imagine that club option doesn't get picked up. He is 32 years old. I don't know. Solid player, but not that impact. So we're continuing to have to search here as we go through. Nolan Arenado has this opt-out of 5 years, $144 million. And there is belief in the industry that he very well may opt out. He has said he doesn't want to leave St. Louis. But if he did, I mean, Nolan Arenado is certainly the type of guy I would like the Giants to go after. He's certainly not young, but a true impact player on both sides of the ball. He can really hit and he can really defend, as we've seen, and thankfully don't have to see as often anymore now that he's moved to St. Louis. But I don't know. He said, like I said, he said he wants to be a Cardinal, and I would imagine that that ends up being the case. So there's really not that many other guys. Brandon Nimmo is someone, he had a great doubleheader yesterday. Brandon Nimmo is he is an interesting player in that he does most of his offensive damage by just getting on base a ton. He's got a career 385 on base percentage and just a 173 isolated power. So kind of an average power output. He's only reached double-digit home runs 2 seasons in his career. He seems to have been, had an injury history in his career as well. There's a lot of years where he didn't play a full season, but when he's been out there, he has actually been an impact talent at the plate and in the field. And so Nimmo is a guy I've been circling all offseason. He is just 29 years old, as he's kind of between the superstars and then the decent role players. He's like a very good player, but he's not going to get that superstar money. And so that's why I kind of circle him. If you could end up with Nimmo plus one of the superstars, that would be a really good place to start. Obviously, ideally, I'd like them to get multiple superstars, but how realistic is that? Probably not very realistic. So just scrolling through the other guys, Mitch Haniger, local guy, Seattle Mariners, hits for power, interesting outfield candidate. And I don't know, Jock Peterson is also out there. So that's about it as I have scrolled through all of the free agents. Wilson Contreras at the catcher position, but of course the Giants have a catcher already. Anyway, coming up in just a minute, more about Jock Peterson, who we learned this morning is being put on the family medical emergency list. So we're going to get into that and talk about Alex Cobb's season wrapping up in just a minute. But first, all right, as promised, Jock Peterson, just wanted to give him, our very best as we learned this morning that he's placed on the family medical emergency list prior to this last game here today with the Giants and the Padres, the season finale for San Francisco. So Jock Peterson, obviously he would have been in the lineup. It appears they're facing a righty. We don't know that, we don't exactly know, I think, who the pitcher is going to be for the Padres. The Padres have to go to New York after this game. They're going to New York to start a series against the Mets on Friday. And so this game, they're not going to push it, right? They're going to rest their guys. So the Giants have an opportunity here to win this game and finish at 500. But Jock Peterson not being in the lineup obviously hurts, but clearly this is way more important than anything the Giants have going on. I just wanted to say, Jock Peterson has been a great Giant in the 1 year that he's been here. It might be his only year here. We don't know. But, sending nothing but our best to Peterson and his family. Hopefully everyone ends up being okay. So Alex Cobb, his season is over as well because he stepped in for Carlos Rodon, who goes on the injured list with this phantom injury that Scott Boras had alluded to the day prior, saying to Susan Slusser of the San Francisco Chronicle that if Rodon goes on the injured list, he's not injured. Well, you can't say that because teams cannot use the injured list just for resting players. You have to have an injury. He is a pitcher. Pitchers have injuries. He had the cracked nail, but the Giants put him on the IL without designating an injury, and they said that he came in not feeling well. Apparently, Thairo Estrada was scratched from today's lineup because he has a cold that's been going around the Giants clubhouse, hopefully just a cold. So Estrada was scratched. Maybe Rodon really is sick. I don't know. It seems a little coincidental, doesn't it? That Boris said what he said and then they put him on the IL because he's sick. I don't know. So, kudos to Alex Cobb, who stepped up when Rodon wanted to back out. Look, I get it with Rodon, a lot riding on his health, $100+ million riding on him staying healthy. But at the same time, you kind of put your team in a bad spot by making Alex Cobb pitch on short rest. The bullpen has been heavily taxed a lot lately anyway. So I just give credit to Alex Cobb for going out there, not complaining, making a start on short rest, and pitching well. I mean, he held the Padres. What did he end up? He ended up with 5 innings, 1 run, no walks, 7 Ks. He did allow 7 hits, which ultimately was a little bit of his undoing this year. When we look at the final line, the ERA is set 3.73, but the FIP is 2.8. The xFIP 2.88. The expected ERA 3.22. Just everything suggesting high 2s, low 3s. And he ends up with a high 3s, mid to high 3s ERA at 3.73. He allowed a hit on 33.6% of balls in play against him. League average is about 29%. And so he did just simply, he allowed more hits on balls in play than most people. And a lot of that can be attributed to defense and just allowing a lot of really weak contact that doesn't get converted into outs. So he also only stranded 68% of his runners, which you would expect more. But overall, it is really hard to complain about the season that Alex Cobb had. I am excited going into next year. It looks like one of the better contracts they've handed out, frankly, in the tenure of Farhan Zaidi. It's a 2-year, $20 million deal, but it has a club option for a 3rd season. And so if Alex Cobb has another strong year next year, they can bring him back for 2024. And that's a good thing. Their rotation is pretty set. They do have Carlos Rodon is going to opt out. So that leaves a hole. But besides that, they do have Webb, Cobb, Wood, DeSclafani, Junis, and then guys like Jelly and potentially Kyle Harrison and others from the minor league system in the mix next year. So that's a lot of guys. I think you're missing a big dog in Carlos Rodon, and you can and should replace him there. But last year, they only had Webb locked up, and it was a bunch of question marks after that. So this year, they'll go into the offseason from a better position in the starting in regards to starting pitchers, and they can spend that money on their biggest need, which is spend that money and that time thinking about who to get and trying to pursue them on the position player group, which is their biggest need. Anyway, the bullpen, they also have needs, but I don't think they're going to heavily invest in that. They're going to make more minor moves, would be my guess. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. Now make your second listen the Locked On MLB podcast. MLB expert Paul Francis Sullivan brings humor, passion, and unique perspective on every team and the biggest stories around the league. Follow the #1 daily league-wide podcast, Locked On MLB, on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name's Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please smash that thumbs up button, hit the bell notification on YouTube, whatever you can do. Thank you in advance. Thank you to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Season will be over and we'll be wrapping it up, giving big picture takeaways from the 2022 season. Can they finish at 500 or will they be 80-82? We'll talk about it tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.